Green. My name is Precious Green. I'm the Director of Programming here at Manny's, and we are so excited to welcome you all today to this timely and important conversation. Tonight's, it is a part of our occasional explainer series where we take on breaking news issues, try to make sense of them, and figure out how we as a community can mobilize around them. We've done this recently with conversations around Ukraine, and now we're having a conversation that's much closer to home around the state of trans rights. And I'm honored to welcome our incredible panel of activists and thought leaders to this discussion. First, we have Imara Jones, an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning journalist, intersectional news producer, and creator of TransLash Media, a nonprofit organization and digital community committed to telling trans stories to save trans lives. Welcome, Imara.
Thank you.
And we also have Jupiter Peraza, who is the Director of Social Justice and Empowerment Initiatives for the Transgender District here in San Francisco. The district aims to create an urban environment that celebrates the transgender experience and educates the world on transgender culture and the community's contributions to the liberation of mankind. Thank you for joining us, Jupiter.
Thank you for having me, Precious, and Manny's as well.
Excellent. And finally, we have Ricardo Martinez. He is the CEO of Equality Texas, which is leading the fight for a Texas where lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer Texans and their families have full equality in the hearts and minds of their fellow Texans and in all areas of law. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Ricardo.
Thank you.
All right, so let's dive right in. We were inspired to convene this conversation after reading about Governor Abbott's edict, if you will, in Texas. So Ricardo, why don't you start us off telling us about what's happening on the ground?
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep it short and brief. So I like to contextualize, right? So that folks understand kind of the landscape in which we're working. I like to point to 2021, where we had the most anti-LGBTQ bills filed in any state in the history of the United States. We had 76 anti-LGBTQ bills filed here in Texas. The majority of those were attacking the transgender community, particularly transgender youth, more than 50 of them. To give you a comparison of just the intense escalation, in 2019, we only had 15 anti-LGBTQ bills that were filed. So that is, I can't even do the math right now in terms of percentages, but it is really an escalation of unprecedented proportions. We were lucky enough with a coalition that we built here, which includes the Transgender Education Network of Texas, ACLU of Texas, Lambda Legal, HRC, Texas Freedom Network, and many others from across the state and national, were able to defeat 75 of those 76. One of them, HB 25, passed in the third special session late into October of 2021. And then it was implemented in early 2022. And this bill did not permit students from participating in sports in accordance to their gender identity. A month later, after the implementation began, this happens. So we were awaiting the Attorney General's opinion because it was sought out. And so he released his opinion stating that life-saving healthcare for transgender youth is considered child abuse. A couple of days later, the governor released a press release, essentially a mandate or a directive saying that DFPS, the state agency, the Department of Family and Protective Services, was to investigate any claims, any reports of child abuse or young people, trans young people who had affirming families that were providing them with gender affirming care. The opinion doesn't have it's not legally binding. It's not backed by law, right? The opinion of the Office of the Attorney General has no legal effect. That neither him nor the governor can unilaterally say we're changing law and this is what it is, right? That's why we have a legislature. So they can share their opinions as much as they want, but it's still up to the courts to interpret Texas law and the Constitution. And it's important just to note that no court has ever found that affirming your child's gender identity is child abuse, not in the state of Texas and not in this country. So people don't have to comply with the implementation of his directive, but it is very confusing, right? Because you have people in positions of power across Texas saying that this is what it is, and it's causing the practical implications are causing harm. So right now what we have on the ground is parents really freaking out and having such high levels of anxiety because they don't know if DFPS is going to knock on their door, right? They don't know if CPS is going to come. They don't know if they have to pull their kids out of school because there might not be an affirming teacher or a social worker or a nurse or administrator that may falsely report them, right? Here in Texas, and I don't know what it's like in other states, but if the CPS investigator comes to school, they don't have to call a parent. They can just speak to your child. So if you can imagine the conversations that are happening at the dinner table between parents and their trans children about what to do when someone comes to your school, if someone comes to your school, they are heartbreaking. And we're also talking about a state that leads in transgender violence, right? This is not new to Texas. We have been creating a landscape that doesn't keep transgender people safe, and it's appalling.
That's a lot to take in. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for the work that you're doing there on the ground. So Imara, I know you have been doing extensive and incredible work studying and doing deep dives into what these actions in Texas and beyond. The question that comes up for me is Texas an outlier, or is it part of a larger concerted effort against the trans community?
Well, that's what you call a softball question. The answer to that is that there's nothing about this that is an accident. The fact of the matter, and we detail this extensively in the investigative series that me and my team worked on at TransLash for over a year, called The Anti-Trans Hate Machine, A Plot Against Equality. And also are now working on the second season of that as we speak, that this is a part of a long-term plan by the right to weaponize gender as abortion rights fade for them as an issue because they expect to win at the Supreme Court. And so consequently, there is a massive operation where abortion rights and fights over gender and body autonomy are a major organizing factor for the right wing in this country. And they need a place for that to go afterwards. And it's going to all be turned on trans people. And so everything that you're seeing with regards to the fact that there were 6 anti-trans bills in 2019 and 198 last year, already 100 introduced this year, with most state legislatures not even in session yet, what you are seeing is just the very beginning of this campaign. We are not in the middle. We are not towards the end. This is the beginning of a very, very long and a very, very tough fight when it comes to trans people in this country. And it is backed by a set of organizations, nonprofit groups, politicians, billionaires, and an extreme religious ideology that have all been working for the past 10 years to get us to this moment. There is absolutely nothing about this that is an accident. One of the reasons, for example, that the right wing is targeting trans youth is because they spent a significant amount of time and a significant amount of resources, both polling and focus grouping issues around trans people, and realizing that a way into people's discomfort around trans people was through children. So it's not an accident that we are focused on children. And the right has been experimenting on this since Obergefell became the law of the land, gay marriage, because they realized that they needed a way to try to stop LGBTQ rights in a way that they thought that the fight against gay marriage was. So we have to understand that this fight and arguments over trans people for progressives, in quotes, is normally one that is seen as an incidental, a marginal fight that comes after all of the rest of the others. And we have to understand that for the right, this is a central fight for them. And it is one of the reasons why they are experiencing so much success, because that's the way they are fighting it. That's the way they are mobilizing it. And we have to understand, as I tell people all the time, that if you are just beginning to engage on issues of trans people, then you are 10 years and a couple $100 million behind.
Okay. Yes. So thank you. Wow. This brings up a really interesting point, because as I mentioned when we started, our team, said, oh, we need to pay more attention because of what was happening or what we saw happening in Texas. And what you're telling us, and actually Jupiter, when we spoke before, what you've shared is this is no surprise. This is a plan, an attack, a series of attacks. And so Jupiter, I'd like you to talk a little bit more. You had said trans people are on the ballot across America. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in your work and how the trans community, how is it impacting people just on a day-to-day level?
Yeah, I will say, Imara couldn't have said it any best. When it comes to trans issues have become kitchen tables, has become a kitchen table issue. And when you look at Texas, for example, I feel like one of the most important connections that we can make as to what is happening in Texas is also the political history of Texas. During the 2020 election, Texas almost turned blue. That's unheard of. Texas has never, ever been blue. It's purple now, but just the possibility of Texas turning blue is incredibly alarming to conservatives. Abortion was a very contentious issue in Texas last year, and trans rights, especially for trans youth, has also become a very contentious issue that the conservatives in Texas have sort of used to fuel their campaigns. And when you look at the framework of what Republicanism is, it's definitely preserving traditionalism. And when you look at gender, it goes against that traditionalism. But also, what I think is so important about targeting trans youth is that gender and the expression of gender has become so prevalent over the last few years and over the last few decades, but more so over the last few years. And the reason why I think that trans youth has sort of become centered in this conversation is because parents are starting to grasp, the complexity of gender and what it is to sort of support your child and love your child in this day and age of, gender expression, which I think that, in Texas, taking the route of sort of, in a way, persecuting the parents, it's very dangerous because, having the support of your parent can really make a difference. And when you target the parent and sort of let the parent know that what they are doing is wrong, it sets a pretty dangerous precedent for other parents and also trans youth as well.
So Ricardo, with the attention, understanding that this has been going on, I guess really the question for all of you, do you feel like that people who are not directly affected are paying more attention, or do you feel like it's still sort of a passing, maybe background conversation? Any one of you?
I think it's very passing I feel like cis people, typically detach themselves with, what is happening with the trans community. And, even more so with what is happening globally. I think the reason why being very diligent and paying very close attention to Texas at the moment is because of what is also happening in Ukraine. Media attention sort of being drawn to that part of the world, it does, it does take away from the focus in Texas. And, average Americans get their daily information and their knowledge from, everyday media outlets. And sort of to have that focus to sort of international politics, it does, it does create space for, neglect and sort of overlooking something as major as going after parents.
Mhm, mhm. So I think one thing that's striking for me, hearing from all of you, and the fact that even with the attention, the heightened attention that's been directed towards what's happening on the ground in Texas, there's still a sense that this is still background noise for a lot of people, as opposed to an issue that is compelling and needs to be addressed and fought against now. One of the things I wonder about is, as members of this community, what do you say to people who are feeling like these issues are maybe niche or don't affect them? I think for me, ultimately, it comes down to the humanity of all beings. And yet, what you're saying, however disappointing it may be, it's true. There are so many people who feel a disconnect. How do you speak to that?
I mean, oh, well, go ahead, Ricardo, because you have to make this argument in real time. So what do you say?
We've been ringing the alarm for about a year and a half, right? This isn't new in Texas. And we had a really hard time getting LGBT folks to turn out last year because, as Jupiter said, unless it's like impacting your daily life every single day, you feel somewhat removed from it, right? You don't see the urgency of it. And as much as you can go into the Capitol and essentially plead for your humanity in front of a wide audience, right? And re-traumatize yourself time and time again, for whatever reason, like the message wasn't internalizing for folks, right? I don't know what it is about this moment that people have all of a sudden tuned into Texas after a year and a half of essentially organizations here pleading for attention, right? And intervention and action. I don't know what it is, but I think that what we try to do is, number one, not get involved too much in negation, right? Like, I don't want to amplify the oppressor's message in talking about our community. That's number one. Number two, I try to trickle it down to the reality here, and that this is a means to an end too, right? Like they're not going to stop at trans people. They're going to come for everyone. They've shown their intent to do so since the late 70s, right? Like, and they're replicating the same playbook over and over again. So you have to understand that you have to get people to understand in a way that makes sense. And for us, it's uplifting stories. It's really driving the empathy, the compassion, the impact that's happening on the ground, and centering the right voices in doing so, right? And then I think as part of what's happening right now, I mean, people understand the importance of family, right? And the central focal point of having a nuclear family, especially one that is loving, affirming, and to their children, right? Because for very many of us, like that's not our story, right? And so the idea that you would be ripping and families apart based on lies, I think resonates with a lot of people, and it is seen as government overreach. And we talk about government overreach and censorship and erasure because they're not only coming for us in our daily lives, but they're also trying to remove us from books. They're trying to remove us from being talked about. This is bigger than just this little moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I normally say, I say two things. I say, first of all, they're very clear that what they want to establish in America is not necessarily a theocracy, it's more of a theonomy. And what's a theonomy? A theonomy is where there's still secular law, because right, in theocracies, you don't have secular law, you only have religious law. But you still have secular law, but the secular law derives its shape and its influence from religious law and from religion. And so what they are doing with both abortion and the anti-trans push is road testing theonomy in America, is road testing the imposition of religious law through secular law in the United States. And this is an experiment to see whether or not y'all will put up with it. And if you do, if you honestly think that this is going to be it, and that's the type of country that you want to live in, then I don't know what to tell you. I don't really know what to say beyond that, because there's nothing really, I don't have a place to go with you, right? If that's what you want to do and where you want to live. I also think that secondly, the most important thing to realize about this is the fact that this is fundamentally a definition of who gets to define personhood. Who gets to define personhood? Is it Governor Abbott? Do you get to define your own personhood? Where does that come from? And again, I think that if you want to live in a country where the government is deciding whether or not you're a person, and whether or not you're a person who deserves human rights, then again, I don't know what to tell you, because I don't have anything to say to you. So I would say, if you want to live in a country where we have secular law that is derived and shaped from religious law, and where the government gets to decide whether or not you are a person, then you shouldn't care about this, because this move is aligned with your values. But if you believe in a country where we believe in the intrinsic rights of everyone, and where we believe that religious law shouldn't be enshrined in secular law, then you should care about this. Because if you honestly think that, again, like Ricardo said, that this is where it stops, then for the third time, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is a giant experiment on their part to see what they can get away with. And so far, they're getting away with it. And so, if parents can be taken away from affirming their kids because they are trans, why can't they be affirmed why can't they be taken away for a whole host of reasons? You've set the precedent. Mm-hmm. So I would just urge everyone to wake up out of a false sense of security. I would urge people to understand the seriousness with which the right wing and the extreme religious right takes this, the amount of money and power and effort that they have put behind this, and look at the ways in which issues around gender identity are also intersecting with white supremacy. One of the things that was most alarming to me when we were researching the anti-trans hate machine last year is that the Southern Poverty Law Center told me that the fastest growing area of white supremacy was white supremacy that intersects and is concerned with issues of gender and gender identity. And so again, if we think that these issues are going to be confined and that they don't have anything to do with you, I would say just set your watch and wait.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I mean, you don't have to wait, right? I mean, pay attention to Florida. I mean, that is a clear indication of what's coming to Texas and what will be replicated across the country next year too. So if you want a predictor of what's going to happen if inaction continues to be kind of commonplace within the grassroots, that is a place to look at.
Right. And one of the reasons why look, there are two ways in which these laws are also really important, right? One is that, they know that they have a really friendly Supreme Court. And the idea is to flood the states with these laws, get a bunch of them passed, then have it go up to the Supreme Court as a case and have the Supreme Court rule friendly to anti-trans legislation. That's kind of the pathway. And if they do that, that's the game. The second thing is that if the Republicans gain control of either the House or the Senate, all this is model legislation for at the federal level. We will quickly see in 2023 and 2024 these bills introduced in a new Congress. It will, I can guarantee you. So I think, again, if you have a false sense of security about where we are, it will not take much time for this to be disproved. And they have a really radical vision for the way that they want to remake the country. And starting with trans people, again, is just a road test to see whether or not they can get away with it.
Wow. Letting that kind of wash over, I'm sure I speak for many who are watching now, just stunned at the magnitude of this. I don't think campaign really encapsulates what is happening. And so I had so many other questions, but I want to pivot because what you've said repeatedly is I am hearing as we have work to do. So Imara, I know you have to leave us shortly, so I'll start with you. What can we do as the larger community to directly support the efforts against this campaign of hate?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that, probably Ricardo can testify to this, but I think that a key thing is that they do believe that they can get away with the tax on trans people. I mean, that's why it's happening. They think that it's all upside for them and all downside for us because progressives don't really care about this. And their side does, and so it benefits them more than it does, quote, progressives, right, in quotes. And one of the biggest things that you can do is to reach out to your elected officials and say that you care, that you are watching, and that there is, because I guarantee you, state legislators in particular understand that if they get one phone call about something, that it's representative of a far larger group of people in their district, because no one calls them about anything. Right? Literally your state legislature. When was the last time you called your state legislature about anything? You may have called your federal, you may have called your city council person, but state people don't get phone calls. So if you make your voice heard in any way on this issue at the state level, it's a big deal. And I think that for whatever reason, in the age of social media, people have forgotten the muscle memory of communicating directly to people, but it makes a big difference. I think secondly, Equality Texas tent, there are 40 states in which this anti-trans legislation is underway. Rather than supporting the usual suspects of organizations across the country that you can think of, well, I won't name them to be polite, but the normal LGBTQ organizations that you can think of, I would really encourage you to go to the Equality Federation's website and find out the local LGBTQ organizations in your state or states where there is legislation that you are concerned about and donate to them. I know that organization that Ricardo mentioned, Tent, is fighting this, and they're 3 people, I think. And in a state that is highly organized with a highly organized political machine that's behind this. So find local trans organizations, make your voice heard. And then the third thing is to do the opposite of what Jupiter said is happening in places all across the country, which is talk to your immediate friends and family about it. like just like you talk about other things in the news, say, there's this thing going on in Texas. What do you think about it? Do you know people who are trans? Like really begin to center this particular campaign in your conversations that you have with your friends and family. And I think that those are three really good things that kind of everybody can do.
Thank you. Before we let you go, tell us again, the TransLash Media has been part of the community ringing the alarm around this. Tell us a little bit more about what you and your team are doing and where we can find you.
Mm-hmm. So what we have been doing starting actually in 2019 was we began to look at the people, the money, the billionaires such as the DeVos family, who are big bankrollers of the anti-trans hate machine, various organizations at the national level, religious ideology, at how all of that was working together to bring us to this moment on anti-trans issues, actually starting in the 1980s and working forward. And so we started that in late 2019, and then last year rolled out the first season of our investigative series podcast called The Anti-Trans Hate Machine, A Plot Against Equality. And that can be found wherever you get your podcast, on Spotify or on Apple. And what we did across those episodes was to actually lay out in a very methodical and focused way exactly who was behind all of this. And so I think that if you listen to the Anti-Trans Hate Machine and put it on when you're cleaning your house or you're driving to work or whatever, by the end of it, you'll have a pretty good grasp of what we're up against and why it matters. And some of the key people that are fighting this, I think that one of the things that really overwhelms me all the time is that I think that, often the only thing that stands between the anti-trans hate machine succeeding in these states are individual families of teenagers who decide that they're going to speak up and make their voice heard. And that this fight is disproportionately falling on the youngest of people because they see what's at stake. And by young people, I'm not talking about Maxine Waters' millennials. It always cracks me up when she always talks about millennials because the oldest millennials are 40. Falls on extremely young people. And I am talking about people who are 16 and 14 and 12 years old, who have to decide to get involved in state politics and put themselves and their families at risk because adults aren't doing their job and standing up for them. And I think that that's one of the things that weighs on my mind all the time, and that we as adults have to stand up so that kids get to be kids. That's an important thing for us. And then I have just put the link. We also created an anti-trans hate machine a resource page on the TransLash website, where not only do you have all of the 4 episodes that are there and you can listen to them, but there are also the transcripts there that make it very easy to follow. If you are a visual person and you don't want to listen, we have infographics for each episode, so you can just read the infographics that give you an insight, and also a press resource page so that you can read some of the press coverage about everything as well.
Incredible. Imara, thank you so much. As always, just a wealth of wisdom and information. We really appreciate you carving out the time for us. So I'm going to send you into the evening. Enjoy. You're on the East Coast. Get some rest.
Thank you. Good night, Jupiter. Good night, Ricardo. Good night, Precious.
Good night.
Bye, Mark. Good night.
Bye. Okay. So Ricardo, we've talked about, I think Imara left some really great nuggets of how those of us on the call can begin to get directly involved. Is there anything specific to Texas and the work that you and Equality Texas are doing that our audience can do or needs to know so we can support?
Yeah, what we like to Texas holds a tremendous amount of influence across the country, right? So whatever happens here is workshopped here, perfected here, and then replicated across the country. So uplifting a lot of the resources that come from Texas, sharing information that's coming out of Texas to your individual circles, to your families, I think is important, because the likelihood that your state is kind of fighting something similar is pretty high. Following organizations that are on the ground locally here who are in the fight is another way to do it. We sometimes have public comment that could be made in state agencies. So for instance, the Department of Family and Protective Services and CPS is having a meeting on Friday. People get to go and do public comment in person to give them feedback about the investigations that they have ongoing with families of trans folks. Anyone, you don't have to be a Texan, can submit public comment. And we want people at the FPS to know that we are outraged by their actions, right? Because they're willingly participating in something that isn't law. And so the more pushback they feel, the more pressure maybe to do the right thing. So that's another way to plug in. And then supporting those grassroots organizations in whatever way you can, time or treasure.
Okay. So just to let everyone on the call know, we will, in the follow-up email that we always send, include links to the organizations that Imara mentioned, as well as Equality Texas. And of course, you are welcome to do your own deep dives into this issue. So Jupiter, we're here in the Bay Area. And I think with regard to trans issues, the Bay Area in a lot of ways is at least seen as a haven, if you will, a safe space. Tell us a little bit about, do we have similar challenges, say maybe in the state of California, because we know that the rest of California is kind of different from here. And tell us a little bit about the work that you and the transgender district are doing to sort of be in this fight, but also bridge the communities.
That is a very great question. And yes, most often people think that the Bay Area, specifically San Francisco, is a place in which trans people are protected, in which trans people are uplifted and supported. But the fact of the matter is that a Black trans woman went missing yesterday, and it's feared dead. And it happened right at the Fisherman's Wharf. She is a resident of the Tenderloin, where the transgender district is located. So the Bay Area is not exempt from having situations that prove that trans people are vulnerable and are unsafe in every part of the country, and not just in every part of the country, but in every part of the world as well. And something that is really important to me about the work of the transgender district is that, we work tirelessly internally to make sure that we stay connected with our community, to make sure that they are safe, that they feel protected, that they feel cared for. And also with the city of San Francisco, it's a very political city. It is highly active. And most often the voices of trans people get drowned out in everything else. And for the transgender district, and for me specifically, as also being someone that has the political knowledge that I've gained through working at Manny's, and also being undocumented as well, that definitely did incentivize to sort of delve into having knowledge that would prepare me for moments in which I really have to defend myself. And with that being said, for me, it's always very important to make sure that I always am paying attention to what is happening in the city, to make sure that the voice of trans people are being represented. And we also hope that that culture that we foster at the transgender district, we hope that culture is replicated in other parts of the country. And I know that that it is being replicated in other parts of the country. But I definitely believe that building community and sort of providing the resources for trans individuals to sort of create their own opinions, create their own perspectives, for them to feel well equipped and knowledgeable, for them to act on whatever it is that they want to act. I think that that is the most powerful way to prepare trans people for a bright and brilliant future, because I know that the potential is there. I know that trans people are incredibly, brilliant and incredible. And, that's also something that, I hope carries on to other issues. Just, the fact that our humanity and our sensibility is what unites us. And if that is something that we can learn through the trans movement, I feel like that is something that we can sort of learn, all together.
Wow. Thank you so much, you guys. I always like to end the conversations that I'm a part of with, a hopeful note. There's so much heaviness, and it sounds like what is driving you all in this work is a hopefulness. So, hearing Imara talk about the young people who are getting involved because they're saying, like, y'all aren't doing it, I'm going to step in the gap. And so I'd like to hear from you. What is giving you all hope in this moment? Ricardo?
Yeah, I'm probably the person that when you get to know me, I don't lose hope. I don't ever lose hope, right? I'm always guided by faith. And I go into it knowing and expecting that we always win, right? Because I believe that truth and love ultimately overcome all of this hatred. What gives me a lot of inspiration, I think, are the families. Trans kids generally have taught me so much about myself in the world, how to live authentically, and how to be really unapologetic about the way that I show up in life always, right? And I think that what I focus on is them when I have a 12-hour, 16-hour day, right? I focus on the kids that, despite living in a state that doesn't necessarily show them that they are wanted, believed, affirmed, respected, or loved, that they're showing up every day. They're showing up every single day to live their life as authentically as possible and fighting. And they deserve the same fight from people in positions of power who are willing to use their platform to create sustainable change. What people don't understand is that there are thousands of organizers across all of Texas that are trying to fight for a more just Texas that really it benefits all Texans, not just some. And I think that we are going to eventually get there. I think it's important to note in this spirit of hopefulness that out of the 76 bills, 11 legislators are responsible for the 76 bills that were filed last year. Only 11 of them, right, as primary authors, which means that the majority of the legislature doesn't have this animus for our community, right? But they will vote with party if they are forced to. And I think that that means that we have a say in terms of electing the appropriate people to represent all of our communities. And that's why votes matter, right? So what gives me hope is that there are a lot of people in Texas that do not participate. This is a non-voting state, an undervoting state. And if people turned out in the numbers that we know we have, we could really make a serious change that could be long-lasting, sustainable over time, and that really puts people first.
Outstanding. Jupiter, same question. What's giving you hope and inspiring you?
I will say that what gives me hope is definitely seeing individuals like Ricardo do the work, that you all do in Texas, to all the organizers that you mentioned. That is what gives me hope, to know that there are others in it with me. and that I myself, I am also in it with others as well. And just having a common goal and just, striving towards it together is what, it's what keeps me going. And there are times that I'm sure Ricardo can attest to. There are times where we get home exhausted and tired and drained and overcome with a sense of sadness. But when you start to ponder about other people in deep parts of the nation that do not know another trans person, or individuals that are staying up late, or that are making the rounds to make sure that trans people are housed and that are safe and that have food and all of those things. I always think of all of those individuals, and how I wouldn't be doing what I am doing without them. And but yeah, I definitely do believe that the future is very bright. Something that I really love to hear about my boss, the president of the transgender district, Aria Sa'id, she always mentions that we are amidst a transgender renaissance. And I believe it. I really do believe it. I feel like, we are now seeing trans people in roles and positions that we've never seen trans people before. And that is very indicative of the direction in which we are heading. And also, the fact that there is an uproar for a lot of the attacks that are happening, not just on trans youth, but on the general trans community. I think that it is very indicative that we are becoming more organized. We're becoming more cohesive. We're becoming, we're making use of tools to garner our power. And I think that is a very, very bright sign. But yeah, that's what gives me hope.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jupiter and Ricardo. We really appreciate you all taking the time and discussing this incredibly important topic with us. You've given us lots of information, lots of resources, and links and ways that we can support. And I personally really appreciate you all doing that for both Team Manny's and the Manny's community. And to everyone else here, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Look for the email from us later today or tomorrow, which will have additional resources, and just a thank you for you taking the time. I would be remiss if I didn't do my job and let you know what else we have going on. Tonight is a double header. We also have, in a few minutes, in fact, very excited, I will be moderating a conversation with Alicia Garza, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, who is currently the principal of Black Futures Lab, and Olga Miranda, who is a leader of SEIU Local 87. They're going to be talking about women leading the movement, and you can join us in person if you happen to be outside this door, or via Zoom. But thank you all, as always. Your support is so important. We, of course, would not be able to do conversations like this or anything if we didn't have the support of a committed family of sponsors who provide monthly contributions to help Manny's do what Manny's is meant to do. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, please go to our website. And also, if you're just interested in knowing what else we're up to, go to our website, www.welcometomannys.com. I really appreciate you all taking the time. My heart is full. Like, there's concern, there's a little trepidation, but knowing that there is so much hopefulness around those of you who are stepping in and leading this fight really just inspires me. So thank you all so much. Have a good evening, everyone.